Hi guys, so it was expected that the insults and booing that was directed at the English team and a number of players in particular was going to come up in questions to Boris Johnson during PMQs. Now Johnson attempted to deflect criticism of him and his government away, saying that his government is doing everything it can to put pressure on social media platforms to stamp out abuse and racism. The problem with that is not all abuse is emanating online. Some of it is coming from members of Boris Johnson's own party and even the Prime Minister himself. This point was perfectly raised not by Keir Starmer, the leader of the opposition, but by Ian Blackford, the leader of the SNP in the House of Commons. Let's hear it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me begin by congratulating the England team for reaching the final, an incredible achievement. But the tragedy of the tournament was the undercurrent of racism that was ultimately targeted at three young men, Rashford, Sancho and Saka. Mr. Speaker, wherever there is racism, it falls on all of us to face it down and to call it out. And it is shameful that it took until last night for the Prime Minister to meet with the main social media companies and finally wake up to the fact that those who publish and promote vile racist online abuse need to be faced down and sanctioned. So, can the Prime Minister tell us what sanctions he thinks would be appropriate for someone who publishes racist content? And it is shocking even to have to say this out loud. Describing Africans as flag-waving pickaninnies with watermelon smiles.
Shameful. Shameful, you can hear in the background. It's a bit disappointing that Keir Starmer didn't engage with this type of language as well. These are words Boris Johnson has said in the past. Once again, it's a pity there isn't a cooperation taking place between Keir Starmer, the leader of the opposition, and Ian Blackford, the leader of the SNP. Because I think they could play off each other in the sense they could attack Boris Johnson together. So it would have been good to hear Keir Starmer repeat this type of language in the House of Commons. So this is what Boris Johnson has said in the past. How is he going to respond to it? Is he going to apologise? Does he understand that his language is normalising the situation?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've commented many times about the words that I've said in the past, and I think the House understands how. And I think the House understands how you can take things out of context, Mr. Speaker.
This is his response to everything he said in the past. You have to understand the context. I would love to know the context. I wish Boris Johnson would actually describe the context. In what context was this language acceptable? Really? When was it acceptable to say these things? What was the context? Unfortunately, Boris Johnson has not given us the context. So we just have to use the language that we have available and build our own context. Look, Boris Johnson, let me start off again. A lot of people, I think most people, have said things in the past that if they heard them back, they would feel very uncomfortable hearing them. Many people have said stupid things in the past, including myself. If I'm confronted with those statements, I would apologise. I would say I was stupid. I wouldn't try to defend the context. I would say it was a stupid thing to say. Now, Boris Johnson doesn't do that. A normal person would apologise and say it was stupid. I've changed. Maybe, we all say stupid things and then we grow up and we move on. If we're confronted with it, a normal person, as I said, would apologise. Boris Johnson does not do that. He's incapable of apologising. So he instead says the context was not understood, but he doesn't explain the context.
I think people do understand that. But what they also understand is that there is a chance now to hold these internet companies to account.
And who's going to hold you to account? You have a massive majority in the House of Commons. The Speaker of the House doesn't intervene and stop you when you lie. Like, what's to stop Boris Johnson from using racist language in the House of Commons? I don't think there's anything, because unless there's some rule that stops him from doing it, but I don't think he could be kicked out. I don't think he could be in any sort of trouble, because he lies and he doesn't get punished. So how is he being held to account? So Boris Johnson is saying here that media companies are going to be held to account. But what about the newspapers? What about journalists who write for newspapers? Are they going to be held to account? Why are we focusing on social media and not old media?
And to make sure that they face fines running to 10% of their global income if they fail to take hate and racism off their platforms.
This is the Conservative leader talking about taking hate and abuse off platforms, when he has spent years of his life writing for newspapers that were publishing hate and abuse.
And I hope actually that the Scottish Nationalist Party will support it.
And once again, he misnames the SNP. But as I said before, Boris Johnson was part of this problem. Boris Johnson is not the solution to this problem. It's easy to say, look, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, these are the problems. They're the ones that are the problem. We need to fix them. But that doesn't get rid of the underlying problem, the racism itself. Because as we can see, and Boris Johnson is a perfect example of this, they can go somewhere else. If they can't publish their hate online, they'll publish it in the newspapers. Now, of course, not everyone has access to opinion pieces in like the Telegraph or the Express, but some senior people do. Boris Johnson used to write articles about using the language that we've heard from me in Blackford. I'm not going to repeat it, but you've heard it yourself. Boris Johnson is part of the problem. And unfortunately, like Donald Trump in the United States, Boris Johnson normalizes this type of behavior. Because ordinary people who are racist will say, should I use this type of language? Well, if the Prime Minister is using this type of language and he's not getting punished, then it's probably okay for everyone else to use it. Boris Johnson's saying in Parliament, these companies are going to be held to account. But he can't be held to account. There is no means to hold Boris Johnson to account. When you attempt to hold him to account, what is his response? You're quoting me out of context. This is not going to get better anytime soon. Unfortunately, it seems that players like Marcus Rashford are going to have to once again step in and do the job that government don't want to do. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. I want to say a big thank you to all of my patrons. You ensure that this channel continues to exist. I'm eternally grateful for all of your support. If you join Patreon, you will receive instant access to our Discord server, where we have both audio and video chats. You can chat with me and other patrons, where we discuss important and non-important issues. Becoming a patron per month costs about the same as a large coffee, so why not check it out?